Hey, good afternoon, Tim.
Good afternoon, Merv. How are you doing?
I'm good, and I'm kind of excited about. Well, excited. Excited is probably the wrong word, but I'm fascinated by today's topic because, in some ways, emotional intelligence. I think we entitled this "Understanding Yourself" so that you can understand others. In with regard to emotional intelligence, in some ways, I think that we've been kind of participating in a discussion of this topic through all of our podcasts up until this point, or at least different avenues of it. So I'm glad that we're going to kind of synthesize this for ourselves and for our listeners today. But with regard to emotional intelligence, I thought, we're working in the realm of project managers, but I thought one of the greatest examples in my personal life of emotional intelligence was in dealing with a surgeon. Now, several years ago, I had a major operation, major surgery. And if the stereotype fits, most people think of doctor's bedside manner as being clinical, cold, answering in grunts and nods, perhaps not as transparent as you, the patient, would like them to be. So imagine now, I'm sitting, this is at the John Wayne Institute in California. I'm sitting on the patient's chair, waiting for the doctor to come in. All I know is that for some reason I pulled the number, the surgeon who was in the top 3 or 4 in the entire country for my particular surgery. So I had this vision in my mind of, again, that stereotypical clinical cold person. And in walks this guy in scrubs. Didn't introduce himself yet. I thought he was an orderly. He had long grayish hair. He looked like he had just come in from surfing because we were near the ocean. It looked
Right.
like he had just come in from having a nice surfing session and had quickly changed into his clothes and was going to usher me into the doctor's office. No, this was Dr. Foshag, kind of a hippie surfer dude, but I'll tell you what, the emotional intelligence of this gentleman exuded from him. Within 3 minutes, he took my anxiety from way up here to down to something normal. And from something that was fairly serious, he made me think that I'm in good hands. His calming demeanor, his explanation of what he was going to check out and what he was going to do just absolutely made me feel like I was in good hands. And I think if it hadn't been for his emotional intelligence exhibited in that way, and of course my stereotypical thought process going in, I don't know if I'd have had as much calmness during that whole procedure. So that is probably one of my best examples of emotional intelligence in kind of in action. But having said that now, Tim, should we, for our listeners, define what we think is a good definition of emotional intelligence?
Let's go ahead and try this. I have the definition everybody can look up on the internet for, but I think that you may be able to add to that. Let me start in this manner. I need to pull it up really quickly. I like this, by the way. I think this is a really good definition. Just a second here. Let's see here. The capacity to be aware of, control, and express your emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. So we have 2 pieces, right? You understand and control your emotions, and you're able to handle your relationships. This has nothing to talk about other people. It all has to do with you and the way you relate to the rest of the world. What do you think about that?
I have to consider that for a moment. I think that's right. Um, in terms of though, I'm trying to think in terms of what if I am trying to work on my emotional intelligence, but the team I'm leading as a project manager is not into emotional intelligence. And I'm going to go off into the stereotypical thing. I'm leading a team of programmers, and forgive me, programmers listening to this, but stereotypically, programmers are considered to be cut and dry, just the facts, ma'am, leave me alone, I want to code. What happens if they don't exude or exhibit that emotional intelligence back? Does that fit the definition, do you think? I'm trying to solidify that in my mind.
I still think it does. I still think it does. And here's why. If I know that I'm a little different from my norms and what I consider the rest of the world to be, I have to understand that everybody else is their own little island too, and they have their perspective. That's one of the things that I actually pursued once I started really taking emotional intelligence and self-awareness seriously. And think about leadership itself. How do you learn how to lead? You don't learn by leading other people. You learn by practicing on leading yourself. You learn discipline by learning how to discipline yourself. What works on me? And then you try it out on others. So this is, just from a specific, how do I be a project manager, actually is something that I grow inside myself. And then I apply it to my other relationships. I think emotional intelligence from a general standpoint is the same thing. We build our frameworks and we build our understanding based on our place in the world. And then we grow out from that. And we use our place in the world as a context to understand that everybody's different.
So here's what I'm hearing you say, and this is what I totally agree with. What I'm hearing you say is that emotional intelligence is something that we can grow from within ourselves. So we may have some baseline at some point, but we, in fact, through experience, through self-awareness, I think you use the term self-awareness, that we can, in fact, work upon ourselves to increase our emotional intelligence. So as we discuss emotional intelligence, we can definitely separate that from our IQ or from our expertise. Those aren't even in question. I mean, we know scientifically that IQ stops progressing at a certain point. Doesn't mean our knowledge doesn't keep progressing, but our intelligence quotient or IQ absolutely stops at some point. We have what we have. Our expertise, we can continue to develop on the job. But if I move to a different job and have to develop new expertise, what we're really talking about is those qualities within ourselves that we can grow, that we can mature. And I have a feeling that we never stop growing in this area. Would you say
you know why I'm chuckling? Because every project manager I've talked to, every single one that has managed projects and teams for 15 years or more, or even organizational managers, have said the technical pieces, the scheduling and the organization and the risk management and all that kind of stuff, that's technical. You learn that in the first 2-3 years of your profession, and you spend the rest of your life learning about people and human behavior. And so again, I think we're totally in alignment here.
Yeah, in fact, when I was kind of considering this, what occurred to me, and in some of the conversations we've had up until this point also, I think we've touched on these, but really what we're talking about are qualities within ourselves that we can improve upon or increase within ourselves. Things like initiative, empathy for others, our adaptability and our ability to persuade, or our ability to influence perhaps, and team building. I think we've talked about team building. I think team building is one of those qualities that we can grow within ourselves that fits within emotional intelligence. I think I mentioned adaptability, but certainly adapting to change is absolutely important in our 21st century, no matter what we're doing. I appreciated people on my team who were resilient, who could bounce back after failure and just keep going on, who were optimistic, who had perspective in what they were doing, and who could develop a rapport. And I really, really, really appreciated those team members who would cooperate, not with just me, but with each other. And I think all of those traits that I just mentioned, and probably a dozen more or more, are part of what we're talking about today with emotional intelligence. Do you think?
Yeah. And what's really awesome is that the content that's out there to actually teach project management. PMI took over the introduction to project management content, the preparation for the PMP, or the project management professional certification. And that content is saying what you're saying. The world is becoming more and more uncertain and complex, and we have to rely on working together more. And so as managers and leaders, not do we only have to understand and have emotional intelligence and self-awareness and all this stuff, but we have to teach and grow and help people learn their own emotional intelligence so they can operate together in order to operate in the way we need to get to do work that's complex and uncertain. So what we're talking about is no longer a nice to have like it used to be. It's a necessary to have.
It is. In fact, when I first, years ago, when I first came across this term, I think it was EQ at the time that was kind of promoted. Mm-hmm. Emotional quotient, to kind of juxtapose against intelligence quotients or something. I think that's what it was. But in my mind, back then, as a new up-and-coming project manager who thought that you ruled by position and not by influence, and at that time I thought, this is just, emotional intelligence is just nothing more than being nice.
Soft skills, yeah.
Soft skills, yeah. Just being able to rein in your feelings when you really want to hammer someone. No, rein in your feelings, because we all want to be nice, but that's not what it is. I think what we have to understand is that, and you started off this beautifully with your definition, it really deals with self-mastery that can then go off into relational skills. And it's that self-mastery and the relational that makes us more whole as human beings and as better leaders and project managers.
Oh yeah. A servant leader by definition creates the environment so good work can be done by great people, right? You create an environment so it's easy for people to get their work done. Without understanding human beings, without understanding relationships, how can we make it easy for people to get their work done? Because we are social animals.
Say that. So without understanding relations, I don't know. I don't think we can. I mean,
and that's the big question. Can we, like you said, can we, especially in these times, even lead and manage, or even have relationships without emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I don't think so. And let me give an example that was kind of going through my mind as you were talking through the last part. Let's take the trait of initiative, which I think was one of the ones I mentioned earlier as part of emotional intelligence. As a project manager, imagine if I can instill initiative into every single person on my team, and therefore they're not waiting for their next command. What they're waiting for is, give me that project schedule so I can see my next 20 tasks so I can get started on all of them or whatever I need to do. But without emotion, and this is, I think, where you might have been going with this, without emotional intelligence as a leader, I can just as easily destroy initiative within my team members, such that they do all sit around twiddling their thumbs until I come into the room and give them their next command. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly. And you're right. The whole concept of quote unquote self-organizing teams, a lot of the fears of young project managers is, if I teach people this stuff, they're going to take over my job. And it's hard to convince people that if you actually instill this in your groups, they're going to push you upwards. They're not going to push you out. They're going to push you upward, because this is where the real success comes in. If they understand this type of work and this type of behavior, it's very easy to get this stuff done.
Yeah, in fact, if they do push you out, then you deserve to be pushed out. I think that's the other side. But you're right. Imagine if you instill, as part of your management style, besides going after those tasks on that chart on the wall that everybody looks at every day, Imagine going after that, also instilling within them the qualities of emotional intelligence. And I think as one author I had read at one point talked about this, he summed it up in one word: maturity. So as we work with our teams, and as they obviously grow in their experience and their maturity and develop these things, imagine, I think you call, what was it that you talked about? It's an agile term, self-performing team, or
Oh,
self-organizing.
self-organizing teams.
Yeah.
Self-organizing teams.
If a young project manager fears self-organizing teams, that is a person who forgot what it was like when he himself or she herself were a team member and wanted the project manager to stop micromanaging and let them go. I think that's the whole idea, is just
well,
to be.
and what does that allow you to do? It allows you to do more strategic work, build the relationships with the executive stakeholders, be more visionary in the work, and understand how to actually articulate the value. You're free to do, actually grow your career and your influence. And to close out this whole discussion of, can we lead or manage without emotional intelligence? Think about this. Here I was, I was basically allowing somebody to have a crisis in front of me. And they were emotionally cratering. And this was a director who was a client. And it wasn't until I realized that he was exposing himself to a lot of risk by opening up to me, but at the same time, by doing that, and by me understanding what he was going through, and being able to support him in this, not only did he get through this crisis with an understanding of, this is basically how humans are supposed to handle these crises, job loss is not just a professional crisis, it's personal, it's emotional. And at the same time, find a solution that actually resolves not just the professional crisis, but the business and the social and the emotional crisis. And this is the best of all worlds. I found out that in consulting, if you're really solving the problems, you're solving all of the problems. And this is where the impact of work can be the greatest and most influential.
Yeah, and I've had very, very similar situations, and typically where I've gone into largely hierarchical organizations and consulted with them, it's amazing how many people would come into my office and say, "Can I talk to you?" And I think it's because they reckon somehow in that hierarchy, they had lost that ability for themselves to experiment with their own ability to grow in their emotional intelligence, and they needed that sounding board, much like your person did. And there was many times that I had staff members from my client confiding in me rather than in their own management. I think it was because they saw something in that whole area. But let me go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, let me ask you something. I'm going to say something, maybe it's a little blasphemous with PMI listening in on us. But PMI, and it's not just PMI. I'm going to go back to my early days as a project manager as well. And when we were having all of these issues with failing projects and projects not coming in on time, we largely solved some of those problems with process. We built process, we put in process. And in fact, PMI largely is a book of process with project management. Principles and guidelines and guidance and that sort of thing. And I think too often many organizations forget about the people side or forget about the non-process oriented parts of the PMI instruction and guidance. But I think, this is me speaking now, but I believe it's true, is that process has taken us so far. I think now any incremental returns that we get by developing better and better process are just that, incremental. But I think where we can really take that improvement curve that I believe has flattened and bring it back up again is through this whole thing that we're calling emotional intelligence, working with our human assets.
So let's you and I agree that this is a milestone, okay? When the PMBOK 7 comes out, the 7th edition of the Project Management Body of Knowledge, let's you and I review that together and talk about what our perceptions of this is within what PMI thinks project managers needs versus what you and I have experienced personally, because I think both you and I are going to be surprised.
Surprise good? Surprise good, I hope.
Surprise good and gooder.
Good.
I think there are some interesting things that have been occurring, and it all has to do with, again, the role of the human being in the work. We all have experienced it from a sense of isolation and solitude. Solitude being great over the last 14 months because you can get deep, but isolation poor because it separates you from your support. And I think we have an opportunity to actually look at this. And again, this whole idea of emotional quotient, again, we look at IQ as a measurement of intellect and the ability to connect the dots and solve problems. Emotional is the ability to connect and understand the social and emotional underpinnings and context of the work. Now, the question is, can we actually be even project managers and leaders without this emotional intelligence and self-awareness?
I don't think in today's environment, today's complex projects are much more complex today. In terms of understanding the individual who's working with us, be it someone on our team, be it our counterpart on the client side, I think unless we understand more of the whole person rather than just the task in front of us, I don't think we can get from our teams and our clients what is needed by the project to incur greater success, the successes that we're looking for. Whether you like it or not, projects are still failing at alarming rates. We still go over budget as an industry at far too great a problem. And I think from that perspective, this is the area that we can certainly work on with our cooperation, our emotional intelligence, our working together to be able to strive towards that. And I think we as project managers owe that to our project teams and our clients to develop our own emotional intelligence so that we can exude that onto the project.
Very good. Very good.
What are your thoughts? Do you think we can as a...
Oh no. I'm an incredibly social animal. I am an isolationist. I'm an introvert. And my greatest work is when I'm cut off from everyone and I can really focus and I can spend time in deep thoughts. However, personally, I've learned that it drains me and I need to plug into my group. I need to plug into my tribe on a regular basis. And that's what inspires me. So what I found personally is I can do my how and my what effectively, but I get my why and I get my sense of purpose from the people that I've selected as friends and as trusted advisors. And so, you talk to your team about this, what's the reason you're doing this? The way you motivate people is connect the why to the how and the what. And I think from a personal experiential standpoint, my why comes from the people around me who are like me.
Boy, that is critical to have your team understand the why is so critical. This may stem from my childhood days when, dad would say, go do something. And I go, why? Because I said so. That was not the answer. And I think our teams deserve more than a because I said so. If our teams are fully invested in the solution, understanding the why, understanding the purpose, they will do everything they can to make that happen. They'll do things that we don't even think of because they're on the ground in the trenches doing the work. And with that why in front of them, they will continue to purpose forward, make sure that project is a success, and make us as well as themselves look good in the process.
I'm reminded of a university professor who gave us an example of an old man taking his grandchild to show them a dam that they helped build, right? And he said, "See that brick? I put that brick there." And then another grandpa takes their grandchild out to that, and the grandpa says, "You know what? I helped build that dam. And because that dam is there, we were able to grow and thrive as a community here." And which person was more inspired, and which person probably was more innovative? You know, this innovations, this motivation stuff, we think when we start off, you know, it's just extra, like you said, it's just soft skills, but that's what it's all about. That's what actually gets humans off the planet and starting to explore the solar system galaxy. It's not the how and the what, it's the why. And, you know, excuse me, that's why I have so much hope for our society and humanity, because we thrive. We don't just survive on how and what, we thrive on the why, which supports the how and what.
And it's the why that accelerates us.
Yes. And therefore, we have to instill this emotional intelligence and this self-awareness, the understanding of that. We have to instill that understanding in everybody we talk with, because it's not just the team. What happens if your stakeholders get this? What happens if your sponsor gets this? What happens if the admin of the vice president on the 14th floor gets this, right? All of a sudden, we have a shared experience that this is important for us to agree on the same why. And if we can get that why straight, everything is going to be laser focused.
And I think from our perspective, you and I are seasoned project managers, having many projects under our belts and many client situations. And in our maturity, I think we have developed a fair amount of emotional intelligence, even amongst us, even for ourselves. But I'm concerned about the youthful person and the brand new project manager, the brand new team lead who's listening to us today, who's heard all of the evidence up to this point, why emotional intelligence is important. But can we help that person out, that newbie out, in terms of being able to develop within themselves emotional intelligence?
It's funny. There's a bunch of questions you open up when you start asking that. First of all, can we even learn emotional intelligence, or is it born? All right. Number two, if it is learned, what's the best way to learn it? And how do we learn it? And let's take those two pieces one at a time. So the first question is emotional intelligence learned, or is it something that's innate in some of us?
You know, I've thought about this, and having grown up with a variety of different people in my high school years, college years, and then my career, I think there is a certain amount of innateness. I think when we start off life, we have been given certain levels of emotional intelligence. Some people, by their very nature, are just quiet, reserved, and want to sit back with a book. Some are garrulous and want to be at every party there is. I think there's a starting point, but I really believe, having now looked at this whole process, where IQ stops at a certain point, where expertise must be developed over and over, but where EQ can be continued to be improved upon throughout our lifetime, I think very much so it can be learned and it can be exercised within our experience.
Mm-hmm. If we didn't if we didn't understand that emotional intelligence could be grown, we wouldn't have stories like how the Grinch saved Christmas, right? That's what these stories and these parables and these fables are all about. It's the whole story about learning that there is a world outside of your personal experience, and it's to your benefit that you take care of that world. Yeah, and I believe that, you know, we do acquire some knowledge when we're young. I think we learn it as safety mechanisms and survival mechanisms, for the better or worse. And then as we grow, we have an opportunity to modify and replace some of those survival or safety mechanisms. And those of us who actually look for personal improvement or go through great trauma are very comfortable with changing these characteristics of ourselves, these attributes. A lot of us think that's just part of who I am. But you'd be surprised at how flexible the human is and how much of who we think we are is exercisable and growable. It frightens me to think about, you know, how much of my experience is based on how I act and behave and think.
Well, and I think it's your experience as you mature that also lends itself to that growth of emotional intelligence. And if I had to do it over again, if I had to start my career over again, I would start earlier with finding a mentor.
Yes.
Because it's the mentor who's already made the mistakes. It's the mentor who, through our agreement, is watching my conduct and can pull me aside and say, here's what I observed. Here's how I might suggest you do something like this in the future. Because without that mentorship, without that experience of someone who has gone before us, we don't always know when we're blowing it. And so we can't grow our emotional intelligence if we don't know we're emoting poorly.
Well, exactly. And again, this is why I have so much hope for humanity. When I was teaching back in 2005 to 2010, nobody reached out to me. Virtually nobody asked me for help. We were all heads down and get the work done, and that's what it's all about. But in this new quote unquote enlightened world, I cannot tell you how many students interact with me outside the class. It's frightening. These people are looking for some type of experience to learn from, not books, not quotes, not practice questions, but true seasoned experience, not to solve their problems either, but to actually just be there as they work through their problems.
Yeah.
And you're right. We're going to see a lot more discussion on the value of mentorship, not just in project management, but in all of these knowledge worker roles.
And I think also in training, you know, last time we talked about the 5 C's of communication, and I got a little animated because a lot of project management a lot of organizations, period, but I'm going to pick on my IT organizations because that's where I'm comfortable, will bring in generic trainers who instruct from the front of the room, collect their check, and leave. And it's the same instruction they give to the project managers that they gave to the hospital stewards or they gave to whoever. And part of what I was saying is, no, it's not enough to just instruct from the front of the room. And I think with emotional intelligence, besides what we just talked about with mentorship, I think there is an opportunity for instruction, but in a way that helps us improve our emotional intelligence through different ways of training, whether it be on the job observation and immediate feedback, or whatever that happens to be. And part of what got me thinking about this also was I read about a situation, I think it was one of the American Express insurance companies, where they provided such training to their middle management. No, I'm sorry, to their salespeople. And within the next several months, sales had improved from 8% to 20%. Whereas in the past, they hadn't been able to through just instruction from the front of the room. been able to make any kind of improvement. There was no kind of upward bending of that curve. And I remember writing a blog for us as project managers, and I had just come off a $300 million project, which sounds pretty big. But in my mind and in the blog, I said, what would happen if something within that team gelled, and I'm talking now about emotional intelligence, such that we got even a 3% improvement in productivity through just how people relate to each other. 3% of 300 million, that's $9 million to the bottom line. What can you do with $9 million? So I think this is truly important.
I was working on what was called back then a PC fleet management project. Okay, which means we were helping companies manage fleets of computers, 5,000, 25,000, 45,000 computers all at the same time. And one of the tools we had was remote management tools. And a director that I was talking to, not even a vice president, not even an executive, said, Tim, you're quoting me a 26% return on investment. You're leaving money on the table. And I said, what? And he said, well, I know you don't need to listen to me. I know you're a big muckety muck and I know you're over there, but listen to me. This is important. And he shared something. And he said, you know, what you're teaching us is not just how to turn computers on remotely, push patches, and upgrade them. You're teaching us how to actually manage our power bills. This changed the whole perspective of the work we were doing. This was the pivot point in our whole organization by realizing that we were not making our numbers good. We were not improving our clients' IT. We were helping our clients look at their business and their lives organization. And it was only because this guy was able to actually influence me and speak in my language. I was too immature to actually explore something like power. And it turned that 26% return on investment to 126% return on investment because we were able to save them in power bills alone, something that was that was more than the cost. And that was year over year. It was amazing. And we realized the leverage we had. And this changed everything. The way we approached our clients, the way we related to our clients, the way we asked questions, and the way we understood the ecosystem and the environment of our clients. And oftentimes we'd come in as the students, and oftentimes we'd come in as the advisors. And it didn't matter because we knew that we would have a good relationship in that place. And we'd have through the relationship, not for us telling them something, not from them telling us something. It's the relationships that we created. It was that understanding. It was that emotional intelligence that actually pulled this through.
Yes, gone are the days when the erudite project teams would descend upon the poor, unsuspecting client. Oh, those poor people who didn't know anything, you know. And there was an attitude years ago, and I've seen it even more recently. But I think you're absolutely right. That collaboration, that cooperation, understanding that our clients have as much subject matter expertise to bring to the table as we have in technical knowledge to make that team move forward. And I think it's understanding that emotional quotient, that emotional intelligence that makes the entire team bigger than the sum of its two parts.
Now, here's the question I have for you, and this may take you a little bit by surprise. One of the problems I have in my later project management experience is not building this knowledge in my teams. It's helping my clients understand this and helping my clients understand the role of the relationship. I was okay for the first 15 years of my project work, just being left alone by my client, delivering what they wanted. But now it's like I'm almost adamant that my client be available so that when their minds change, I can change their work. When they understand something, I'm able to articulate the value for them a little better. What's your take on that?
Well, I think I probably had a very similar experience to what you just described. For years, I consulted to project management organizations to help them with subject matter expertise, but also with process, with understanding how to get more out of project teams. I then ended up being awarded a couple of very large projects on behalf of the client side. And they brought me in to help them get their team ready to work with the IT team, whatever IT team won their project. So when the IT team descended upon that project, it was up to me to have this entire, and sometimes there was 40, 50 people, have them prepared to work as equals and be able to hit the ground running and not just sit there kind of wide-eyed and, you know, deer in the headlights look every time the IT team said, this is what we're doing next. If the IT team said, we're about to do requirements gathering, my team, the client team, already knew what that was. But instilling within them, not just the knowledge of what they're about to do, but also how to relate. And in terms of part of what I had to do is to also give them some stereotypical understanding of what the IT staff would be like to work with. And the fact that they were highly intelligent, not that my client team wasn't, but that these people came in and they did not stop working from the time they got up in the morning till well past midnight. And just to infuse within them that understanding of the other team, immediately when that project was awarded, the client team was ready and they were off and running. And in fact, sometimes they got ahead of the IT team in a way that the IT team had to scramble to keep up. So yes, I've had that experience, but I think it was because I came from the IT side that I was able to relate to the client side. And I've always been a champion of the client. I've always believed their subject matter expertise was first and foremost what we needed. But by championing them to the project team and getting them ready, it really helped that project move forward quicker.
I agree.
That was a good question, by the way, and it was a verbose answer.
Oh, no. That was, you were very articulate. I wouldn't call that verbose. Now, here's another question for you. So we've been differentiating skills from, the other components of knowledge that a leader has to have. And I generally call those attributes, right? Adaptability, persuasiveness, empathy, initiative, and all those others. Okay. What are other attributes of emotional intelligence? What are the other components of emotional intelligence that we really need to focus on that we can refine?
I think what I just talked about a lot was that whole relationship building. We think of team building as something that we bring the experts in to help show us how. But however we begin with that rudimentary knowledge of what team building is, that is one area that is so important, not just within the IT team itself, but in my experience, a cohesive team that's blended and even situated in the very same location, co-located with the clients. I think that relationship building, that team building, that ability to master the cooperative nature of what we do in teams, that has got to be one of the top emotional intelligence attributes that we can afford to our teams.
Okay.
Did you have a different idea? Did you have another idea?
No. That's perfect. Influence.
Influence, yes.
I think the ability to persuade. I think confidence. I think the sense of character. And it's funny because character has to do with demonstration of a lot of these things. I think another thing that helps is more generally towards leadership. I've talked about, and I am very well known for talking about the fact that people do not follow somebody who's learning to be a leader. People follow somebody who is demonstrating leadership. And we learn how to lead by first learning how to lead ourselves, and then people naturally follow us. I think a lot of these attributes that are related to emotional intelligence, I think a lot of these attributes are like that. We demonstrate them, and that allows people to understand and trust us a lot more so that they're able to follow us a lot easier. Again, we can call all of this stuff charisma and charm, but pragmatically, they're just indicators that say this person is experienced in learning and understanding how to get people to follow them. I guess I'll follow them too.
Yeah, and one thing that caught my attention when you were talking about confidence. How many times have I been in a situation that it seemed like all was lost? And it's the confidence of the project manager through the confidence of his team that allowed a calmness to descend upon the project such that my client did not panic. And as a result, we were able to continue on and get through the problem that seemed insurmountable. So yes, even a confidence that's shown outwardly to those around us is an attribute that we can learn to use and develop our leadership and our emotional intelligence skill levels.
We have a little bit of time here. Let's play with that idea of confidence. Inventory. Now, how do we use confidence and how do we grow it? And what do you call demonstration of confidence, by the way?
Well, I don't call it bravado, because there are those chest beaters out there who will pretend that all is well and they're scrambling underneath, and then they want to just grab their team into a room and say, what are we going to do? No, that's not confidence. What it is, I think, is something born of experience. You know, I've seen something like this before. I had this experience 3 projects back. This is what we did. Maybe we can alter some. It's a matter of relying upon experience, having enough faith in ourselves to ask for help and get someone else with more experience to come in and help. That's confidence. Confidence is not me being the brave one, me being the out front one. It's me saying, I've got a problem. We have a problem. It's my job to help solve it. Now I'm going to solve it, even if I have to go for help somewhere else.
Very
That's
good.
kind of the thought process.
Let me add to that, because I can't do anything but agree. Confidence is not an emotional state. You're right. It's not bravado. It's not standing up and taking one for the team. What it is like what you said. It is very, very firmly founded in statistics. Confidence is a measurable, quantifiable force. It's experiencing something enough times that you have a probability that's measurable of future success. That's all it is. It's going through things enough that you know how the outcome's going to be. And if you go through things enough time, you know exactly how it's going to come out. And this is it, like you said, it's not that tense bravado. It's that calm demeanor It says, yes, I've walked down this road and we know exactly where that road's going to lead us.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking here, because we've explored this pretty well, I think, but I was thinking that maybe we could help our listeners get to know you and me a little more at the personal level. And if I can work with this emotional intelligence thought process we've just had here, let me ask you a personal question that'll help me and others get to know you a little better. So assuming that you've had a rough day, a stressful day at work, how do you de-stress, Tim? Your emotional intelligence is, your emotional quotient is full, but you've been stressed all day at work. How do you de-stress when you get home?
So I take it from both an emotional and a physical standpoint. I have some personal indicators that say my physical body is responding in this way. My emotional response system is responding in this way. I'm into my head too much, and my shoulder muscles are too tense. And so I do two things. I look at both of those. Number one, my muscle system is too tense. That's easy to fix. If you ever watch in Africa, when a predator chases prey, like a lion chases a zebra, right? And they run, and the lion runs out of steam and rests. What do the zebras do? They shiver. That shivering is a physical response to removing a lot of the adrenaline that's been pumped into the body. I do yoga and I relax and stretch, and I have taught myself to feel that tension leaving. That's the physical part. The emotional part is I engage in something that gets me out of my head. It's not a distraction. A distraction gets me away from making critical decisions. But this emotional response is me getting into, basically relaxing and opening up. It's feeling safe. It's that Maslow's safety need fulfillment. So I put on some nice smells. I start dinner. I have conversations with my family while dinner's cooking and I'm relaxing. And we remind each other that it doesn't matter when dinner occurs, that the conversation is more important. It's funny. We started this about 5 or 6 years ago. We always have one statement that happens while we're cooking dinner. It doesn't matter when the dinner occurs, because the conversation and the relaxation from the day is almost more important than eating the food.
I'll have to try that. In my case, I think what I probably do the most is, I may come home and contemplate for a while on what happened and why I'm stressing. But more importantly, I kind of resort back to something that a mentor told me early in my early years. And I said, what can they do to you? They can't shoot you. They can't set your house on fire. They can't take your family captive. So what's the worst that can happen? Let's just work through this. And sometimes I'll kind of work through it and think, you know what? I'm going to let it go. I'm going to sleep on it. Tomorrow we'll get into this conversation. And then I'll either turn on, and this may be a distraction, I'm not sure, but I may turn on a favorite TV show, probably a comedy, or just grab a good book and just get into my book. And when I get into a book, I lose sight of everything that's around me, and I just get immersed in that particular thing. It's amazing how the stress just kind of falls off. Like you can almost feel it falling off. Mm-hmm. It's a great thing. Part of all of this is emotional intelligence, how to deal with stress.
Yeah. And remember, if we understand this about ourselves, we can actually use this as a flashlight. We're shining this flashlight to see ourselves, but we can actually use this same flashlight to turn it 180 degrees and observe other people. And if we walk into a room and we observe the individuals tense, or maybe just one out of group tense, we can actually read that room just like the old silver-haired guys read the room when we were young and walked in.
Yeah, I remember. Oh, that's fantastic. I remember on a project, my counterpart on the client side called me up frustrated. She was just, you could tell in her voice, quivering, anger, almost at tears. She was telling me, and I said, "Whoa, stop. We're going for a walk."
Yeah.
We left the building. We walked for 15 minutes, came back. The problem dissolved. I mean, the problem didn't dissolve. The stress around the problem dissolved, and then we were able to solve it. But just get them out of that environment. But what happened? It's like you were saying, there has to be that emotional intelligence to see it in someone else, to see the reaction in someone else, to be able to pull them out of that, and then help them with that. And you know what? About a week later, she called me up again, and she said, "Hey, I saw what happened in that meeting. We're going for a walk."
You know, it's interesting. I've thought about this from time to time. We always think about conflict as external, something between me and you, or us versus them, right? That's what we think of as conflict. What if conflict can also be something internal?
Oh, it is. It often is.
And, again, I think conflict management is part of this emotional intelligence. It's actually isolating the emotional connection from an issue, and you're resolving that emotional energy, and you're basically taking that tension away through conflict management, and then you can deal with the issue. And if we can actually teach ourselves as well as our teams this ability, that's incredibly powerful, because we can allow each other to feel emotions and it doesn't scare each other. And it also allows us to say, okay, we've now dealt with emotions, we've now dealt with the conflict. Let's get down to the issue and work together.
It sounds like you just created topic for another episode of our PM coffee chat.
What do you want to call it? We'll do that. What do you want to call it?
I don't know it, but it'll have the word conflict in its name. I haven't got a catchy title just yet.
Okay, I'll figure that out. We need to talk about this, because my students really, really enjoy talking about this topic. And that's why I know that this topic would go really well on this show, because again, the students I have come from, multiple decades and multiple cultures. And let's spend some time playing with this idea.
Yeah, we should. I'd like to even continue on with some of this conversation, because I think there's a whole lot of questions that we can bounce off each other that people listening to our responses would be well served. Like, I'm thinking something along the line is, Tim, how do you celebrate success? We don't have time to get into that right now, but how do you celebrate success? How do you recover from failure? How do you respond when you're challenged? And maybe some of that is the conflict discussion. Have you ever had to change your behavior, either at work or at home? And if so, how did you change and why did you change? Just those kinds of questions that we could spend easily an hour just exploring true practical issues in terms of, and then how we can use our emotional intelligence to solve those problems and to become better human beings at the same time.
Okay, let's do this. If you're listening to us live today, give us your opinion whether we want to continue this next week or not, and we can rewrite our schedule. If you don't have any opinion, that's fine too. We have topics for the next 2 years we can talk about. But again, if you would like us to continue this emotional intelligence discussion, feel free, and we're happy to do so.
Great, Tim. I think this has been a great discussion. I think our hour is closing up on us now at this point. So where can you be found, just so people know where they can ask questions to follow up on this discussion?
For right now, I'm over at LinkedIn, and that's my primary social media channel of choice. And where can we find you, Merv?
Also at LinkedIn, and also on my website, which is peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com. Long name, but it's all in the title.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
So until next time, Tim.
Sounds good. Yes, looking forward to it, and looking forward to participation of our listeners, as well as comments and questions that you may have. Please give it to us. These topics are all resilient and all wonderful for us to explore, but if you find them interesting, we'll prioritize them.
Great. Until next time.
Thanks again, Merv.